Kevin, welcome, man. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate Mealy coming on because I've been trying to get you guys on for a while. I've known about you for a while, so it's super exciting to have you on and to talk about Mealy and what you've been working on. I don't know how much of an introduction people need. I think a lot of people already know about Mealy already, but maybe if you want to give kind of like a basic intro about what you're working on, what Mealy's been working on, and kind of like what you guys have been building.
Yeah, so we started as like the central vision has never changed, which has always been permissionless. We started with the idea of like, hey, we liquidity mapping dynamics of pump fund and map them onto a prediction. We thought prediction markets, like quite frankly, when we started building Melee, we to build a prediction market, we're building it to like fix current state of speculation, right? And we saw a bunch of meme like, hey, look, tokens are expirable, trying to trade culture and events just doesn't work. Like that are non-expirable, sorry. Because like you end up being in the greater fool theory, or like, who's gonna, like the value of that is based on, who is gonna hold it and who is gonna, that comes from like a greater fool's theory. But because it has these like liquidity dynamics. And there's few things pure as like tokens and meme coins for like relevancy. So we were like, what if we could package a lot of the negative externalities things as a token, and everyone's value going up because people are putting in money and like, yay, everyone wins. That was the vision, right? Now the implementation is where so got in. It was a parimutuel and notions of this idea. Very narrow markets. Duration markets kind of work, but they're subject to like the core Achilles heel that we saw that we thought was going to prevent us from scaling to a full permissionless prediction market product. So I can pause there and then I can go on if you want.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like just kind of on a basic level. How do these parimutuels work? Like, how does the contract work? If I'm a trader coming in to your, I know nothing about how this works. If I'm coming into your prediction market with $50, looking to place a bet, how is this going to be different than Poly market?
Yeah, I'll start with mutual. Like, oldest mechanism, it was before you and make like event-based driven outcomes, right? And so like horse racing was the canonical like market. This is where it really took off. And what it was is like, hey, I will just take everyone's pool. The price I give them at the time is just like a ratio of dollars in the pool, like it's 40, like the 40-60. I just price it based on how many shares are out there versus how many you're trying to buy, how many will it create versus the liquidity, right? And get these shares, and everyone can come in, money can come in forever, but that means I'm unlimitedly minting shares against like a limited pool, right? Unless the other side keeps growing, like you're diluting everyone as you keep buying shares on one side, right? And so the way parimutuels used to pay out in general is just it's literally parimutuel. It's what is it? Pro rata of how many shares you have versus how many liquidity. So everyone pools their money on either side. The side that loses, wins, gets a share of the pot based on the number of shares they have, right? And they bought those shares at varying prices. Liquidity on either side was moving around in the normal parimutuel setting. So poly market was like, well, I guess I'll go to the problems of it because then we can talk about like order books and how those solve these problems, but they create other problems, right? And so like in a normal parimutuel system, the problem is that you have this authority on like the liquidity and limited And so in a market that becomes obvious, what is the obvious thing to do? Well, if I can spend money and get more out of the pool than I spent, I'm always going to buy it, right? There's no reason for me not to. And so at the end of an event, things looked uncertain. The minute they look certain, the natural market force is for everyone to flood in. And what that'll dilute every holder that's there. And so you thought you were buying at 50-50 odds. 200% of your pool comes in right at the end, and you get paid out $5 when you were supposed to get paid out, $50, right? And that's the core problem. You can get around, like every pari-mutuel that tries to get around it today does things like pausing the market before a volatility happens, right? So you can't place bets. That's how horse racing works, right? Everyone places their bets with horse race, and then the horse race, so you trade live. Or they try to do it with like what we tried to do, which was a bond curve, is make them more expensive toward the end, do some financial stuff like that. It kind of works, but it still doesn't defeat the problem, right? It makes it more expensive, but it's trivially expensive depending on the size of the pool. And with permissionless markets, you have to be able to support pools of any size, right? So you can't say like this works only if we have it's not a setting if everyone make a market, right? And like there's certain areas where it works, but most of them don't. And move in there like an order where someone else will take my risk, give me a price for it, and we can do that. But again, you get away from permissionless. Now, counterparty has to be willing to quote, right? And so pari-mutuels lose trading. Event, the very liquidity bootstrap things we wanted for like an actual permissionless market, right? So that's kind of biology there. We can talk about AMMs a little bit. They fit in here in the context of implementation in crypto, but they're similar. So
yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept. Kevin, by the way, not to interrupt, I'm getting a little bit of chop from your end on my side. Maybe we could. Voice is coming through fine, pictures not. So maybe if it's up to you. We can go PFP or not.
That works.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I'm on high speed right now and everything like that, but sometimes we get this chop. So sorry about that, Kevin. I apologize. It's a really interesting concept, man. I'm curious too. I was reading through the docs a little bit for Mealy. How are you guys resolving the markets? Is there a new kind of resolution technique that you're coming up with, or is that just not even important in this context?
The context of Melee V1, which we will be listing, is chain link normal data sources. So we're starting with things like right? So resolving is very easy. As far as like full market resolution, solution designs work with some third-party people for all of this, and we can go into that. I kind of found I guess like really where the PMM comes in is like how do you preserve the ability to bootstrap liquidity? So, the problem of passive capital participate in a market because you've never incentivized the long tail of market. Right, you're never going to get people to like random esoteric markets and step in. So that passive capital is structurally profitable, right? And create a market, and if you can solve that in a experience of like an order book where you boost capital in LPLD everything. So resolution for our markets that are how you trade these markets, how the liquidity works, how we can work, and then from there we'll do everything else. We're working with a couple of third parties I won't mention for different resolution mechanisms. The way Melee will work is that it will be a market price of kind of just pick which one you want to use for your market, right? Depending on the data source. Eventually, in the longer term of our life cycle, we do have our decentralized mechanism, but that's another big build. So the PMM working first. So, yeah.
I think you brought up a good point too, right? Like my biggest problem with prediction markets right now, as they currently are, is that there is no long tail. That there's a hard cap on how on whether I can be more right or more wrong. It's not as seamless, and that does stop me from getting into it. Also there's so many interesting markets right now that I see on Polymarket all the time that I would love to play, but they're strapped for liquidity, right? So, that's the biggest issue, which is why I'm so interested in this field that you're working on. How are you designing things for the creator side? Because when you're talking about creating permissionless markets, spinning them up, there's a whole new category of user that pops up, which is the creator. I mean, we haven't designed prediction markets like that at all. Have you guys thought about that? What's that like? Kind of exploring.
We've heard a lot. The initial product will start pretty boxed, or we'll have kind of like the way we think about it is like events are is around an event. So that's really like the thread, right? Based on an event, like there are other things you want to know about it that naturally come up. Oh, what a lot of prediction markets like fail at is curation, right? If you and there's just really know what to or like what's worth betting on, right? So either one has to be where everything's like a my creator page, and I have certain markets that I'm launching and stuff, which we will have. But really, the way we think about it, at least initially, like you're going to look at the World Cup, and as the World Cup event comes out, there might be more questions you want to ask about it, right? That are relevant to people watching the event, right? And so for us, the permissionless part will probably come in initially as like, hey, hop on this event I'm already watching, right? And so we might have like big canonical markets that you can spin bets on permissionlessly, and then like do certain things on that. And there's a bit of like a for like event-based, kind of. Eventually, we will have full like make. But when you get to that stage, you really have to like do it based on like profile and like discovery and stuff. And so that's really how that's going to have to work, because otherwise you're just going to be at like a sea of prediction markets, right? The way that those work though, like the liquidity mechanism behind it has to be the PMM, right? Because money has to come from somewhere to bootstrap all of these permissionless markets, right? And so really what you need to have is like a structural reason for passive capital to come and be the counterparty for all these markets, right? So if I, Joe, want to make a market on something, there's liquidity to reasonably. It's like I'm going to get right. Actually, if it resolves in my favor or not, right? Which the problem, like you're taking an opinionated risk of inventory when you match someone else's orders. So on like very markets, no one knows how to price it. There's not enough high fidelity information out there, and so why would I take the risk of holding that inventory, right? On an AMM, you have a similar problem. If you have a two-sided pool, when the market becomes certain, one natural thing on them does all winning share in order to acquire right? And then the AMM itself right? So what we realize, all of this is like spread in the order is profit maker making. And to the people predicting market in a pari-mutuel system, right? And so like what the PMM does is it keeps this pool-based design. It borrows a bit of like, you're like maker curve that is guaranteed for, like an order book gives guaranteed to sell right now. But trades that happen or any actions in the market goes to your position as counterparty liquidity rewards. In the same way, market, while instantaneously you may lose a little bit of money on your position if you tried to sell out of a PMM market versus an order book. In the long tail, holding your position, you make a lot more money because all those spreads from volume within the market, all of that accrues to your position, and you have this position whose floor value grows over time, and that floor value can far exceed what your initial entry time guarantees, right? And so what that means is now we have the ability for unrated actors to come take positions in the market and accrue position value just from the other side's trading, right? And so now you have a reason to come into a market early and buy all sides and sit there. And as volume trades against your liquidity, your positions grow in value. And when the market resolves, you end up making a lot of money no matter what side resolves because you acquired so much reward. Makes sense.
Yeah, that it's a pretty unique concept. Is anyone else working on this right now, or are you the first ones?
No,
to kind of
this is definitely we've not found anyone going down this route. It's a pretty like right because that you get are immediately going to be slightly off of what a normal picture market will offer, right? But that spread is the spread that internalizes to people's yield, right? And so like that's kind of the point. It's like if I'm willing to hold my position for a little bit, like I can make that back pretty quickly over the lifetime of the market, right? And so people who are willing to stand in as counterparty liquidity on trade are the people who accrue the rewards that pay them out more favorably. Now, right? And so for odds buy on poly market, right? It's just that at any point in time, our deviate from it, people are back. Sometimes we slightly the poly market, slightly below it, and that activity of across liquidity to the market.
I kind of have a more philosophical question for you, something that maybe you're not thinking about right now, but maybe you would think about down the line, which is once you have these permissionless market creation events, and you kind of already mentioned this already, how do you regulate, people putting up, like for instance, one situation I could see is that people puts, someone makes a prediction market about a specific person, do this or do that. How do you monitor that, or do you plan to?
Like, as a website, like we'll obviously have like monitoring and like content moderation, right? As a smart contract, like I guess you could go launch it, but we're not going to display it, So that's kind of the difference there. Is like the markets we display like do go through quality control, like they're on our front end for a reason, and we'll take ownership of that. But like these are smart contracts on on Solana, like you could launch your own market. The PMM is a very flexible primitive. We do expect people to build other products on top of it. So
in the end, the distribution is up to you. You can launch, like it's exactly like what you were saying. You can create these event contracts. You could spin something up. If the contracts themselves are open to developers, I would love that, because then developers can kind of build on top of it, like you were saying. But yeah, in the end, I think distribution will be, your site has more eyeballs, so you're basically in charge of displaying it. So you would just not display it, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, obviously, like we are the taker on the contract. So like if you use our contract to create markets, we're still getting fees. So, so we can set it out for certain creators. There's, like, you know what, like we, right? You can create on it, but like, like use liquidity primitive for conditional markets, similar Meteora is for across the line, right?
What behaviors have you been observing while you've been testing this out that you might not find?
It's incredibly addicting. Like it is incredibly addicting to see yield accrue to a position prediction market, right? Because when other people, you might enter and you're like, oh, I'm at 86 cents on a dollar, even though I paid a dollar. It doesn't take that much money at the beginning of the market because the books are so thin to accrue that money back to yourself. And so, like, as people start trading, we've been testing a lot with like Bitcoin markets, right? Just up or down. As that volatility happening, people are trying to guess. All that movement accrues reward. Like, oh, I didn't have to do anything. Now I'm like in the black, you know, and it gets better and better over time, and it's pretty exciting. Like, I don't think I've felt that for any other market. Like, it's very fun, right? And then you're faced with this like esoteric secondary decision of like, I'm going to lose money, but I've accrued a lot of rewards to the up now or later, because if I switch now, I'll rewards before I lose. If I switch later, maybe I hedge myself and don't lose at all, but I don't get any rewards, right? And so it adds this like dynamic of like really interesting, like addictive loops. Like, yeah.
It sounds like it's almost a early crypto vibe type of thing, or you know, like early DeFi type thing.
It's very weird. It reminds me of like DeFi summer yield on a
yeah, which is what I'm interested in. And yeah, I will say right now, prediction markets, you don't get that. You do get that sometimes, but it is really refreshing when you get that sort of DeFi feel to them. I think my theory on prediction markets is this. My general theory is that it's going to play out a lot like social media, in the sense that there are multiple winners. There's just different types of approaches. You have your Twitters, you have your Facebooks, you have your Reddits. I think that prediction markets are going to follow a similar trajectory, where there's where there's a lot of winners. Where do you see Mealy fitting into that?
We definitely want to be more the cultural side of things. Like obviously sports and prices are like the bread in prediction markets right now, and it's the way to like bootstrap a product, right? So where we'll start. But like we very much view ourselves as more of like a creator platform. Like we want profiles and events to be kind of the main thing, right? So it's like I have a profile on Melee. I'm the expert on, you know, like Dave Portnoy, right? Runs markets to his audience over, you know, sports things that are going on in the world and that are relevant to his audience, right? And so ideally, like his page would be tailored to his you know, audience and his markets, and you to say the market for a big football game, and on it you could see like Dave Portnoy's like prop bets, right? Or, you know, my friends are making these, or like could spin this up with my friend, like he's saying like, oh, he's gonna trip. Small markets, just like other people watching the game on Melee or otherwise, that resolves quickly, right? And so lots of things like that. Eventually, we'll probably get into like leverage and parlays and like, you know, rolling over things into multiple events and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a little bit longer term.
It's almost like creating meme coins, in my opinion. I said this before on a different stream that I was doing with choice markets. It's basically like launching a meme coin, I think, or it could get there.
It could get there. That's like the $1 capped upside on the prediction market right now. like the dollar mark, right? And the ability to make 100x only exists at 1% or lower, like likelihood, right? That really changes your accruing yield. Like you can make accruing yield, especially if you made your bet early, you were in the pool, you got the best possible price, and then you stuck in it through the whole market, which for most retail users, our main betting experience, right? Put some money on the Knicks, I'm gonna wait till if I win or not, right? But that's the betting experience. Prediction markets, all that money in between that's moving is like where the market makers are making their money, and like there's a lot to go around on that, like a lot more than the single dollar you get paid out. And so when that gets into the actual, bettors themselves, like we don't have liquidity providers. Every bet, and this is the thing of a pari-mutuel market, everybody is everybody's else counterparty, which means everyone is
right. We've seen exchanges like Kelshi and Polymarket more recently, really try and cozy up to regulators and institutions. And there's a whole game that you play where, if you are getting in good with the regulators, you're getting in good with institutional market makers. Mm-hmm. Do you think that you'll have to play that same game, or are you playing that same game, or
yeah, we're having some conversations in the background, and I mean, there's always, look, we won't do anything that's illegal, right? The reality is, for Melee in the U.S., it will probably be geographically, and we'll probably have to work through partners to license the tech. Like the thing about Melee that is very attractive is like it solves a problem a lot of sports books are having right now. And like, how do I take my sports book type product and provide a like you see Melee white labeled under other products, right? Wouldn't even type thing, because there is a offer a market like aiming to hold the inventory on PMM as like the earliest positions in the market for other people to trade against, things like that. It does slide sports, and so we see a lot for us for an engine that power markets like everywhere. Whether we can get the license to offer that directly as a service provider in the US or
what's next for you guys in terms of your roadmap? Are you thinking about raising more money? I know that you're already venture backed. Are you thinking about scaling more? Are you looking to hire more people? What are you doing in preparation for this launch? And when do you think the launch is, by the way? You may have mentioned that. Apologies if you did.
I won't go. We're aiming for mid-September. We're in audits right now, and then going on. Our products will just be and price markets, as well as made markets on certain events. Those will kind of be the earliest ones. Those creators will be like whitelisted onboard creators who like have an audience in the category that they're that will eventually expand. I think right now what we're looking for is to just kind of prove out the PMM. We spent the last year going back to drawing board and building this. There's a lot of things we see internally, but earliest thing we want to do is just like validate that thesis, make sure it's profitable for liquidity providers, and then we'll be looking to scale beyond that. Timelines there, I'm not gonna say right now, but yeah, we will be able to scale after the launch.
So, Kevin, my last question for you, I think we're about on time here, and again, thanks for coming on and talking about this. My last question is, you're building on Solana. I'm not as familiar with the Solana prediction market scene. Do you think Solana is, what's your opinion about Solana as the future of the chain, the future chain for prediction markets? Do you think that, is there something about it that just works better for what you guys are building?
I mean, so I don't really know my history, but I was a early Solana core engineer back in the day. So I have my roots in Solana. So like for me, building on Solana is like being home. It's just the thing that I've known the most. I like Solana itself is just like, the infrastructure that's going to hold up for the long term. At least that's how I feel about it. And so, like, I think we've entered just generally an era of crypto where like, the chain you're on probably percent, right, versus the product you're building. And just like Solana because of history, and we like the community and support engines, and I'm familiar with coding on Solana and all things. And partly because we believe it's going to be around and scalable for a long time. But the core of it, like, we're building predict, right? And like it will stand on their own no matter where it exists. And right now Solana meets all our needs, so we don't see a reason to move off of it. But like priority number one is always going to be that the PMM is working well and able to make a system very community, like in a lot of ways. And like the extension of the PMM after this gets out here is to start tokenizing, right? And there's like a strong token ecosystem on Solana. And you can imagine when we have multiple permissionless prediction market tokens, like to take from other predictions market on the PMM. So it starts becoming like a place where that kind of like DeFi and token ecosystem matters, like at that point. So I think that would be the second most prominent reason. But at the end of the day, right, we're focused on making Solana right now. Solana is the chain that we don't have to think about in order to do that, right?
Yeah, distribution on Solana is great. I think it's one of the best chains for, especially if you're building something tokenized. I think if you're looking to distribute through those tokens, probably the best chain to do it right now. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you talking about this and walking us through what you're building. Parimutuels, it's fascinating stuff. Like I'm really excited to do it because I want to be a creator. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting. It's quite an addicting product, and the whole and accruing rewards, and then like seeing that to you as fees as well is like pretty nice. So we'll definitely work toward permissionless as much as possible. But as we started this journey, we thought it was a couple of problems, and we found out that it's a lot of very hard problems, and we're trucking through them one at a time, and it's been quite fun. So.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and yeah, I'll catch you later.
Thanks for having me.